this is kind of Cheeto's fight to lose, right? Stylistically, we know Pedro Munhoz can just sit on the outside and just try to leg kick him, pick him apart and stuff like that. But I had a feeling, AJ, that style of fight is not going to be as favored as when Marlon Vera, as he builds over the course of 3 rounds, he started popping him with the jab, landing the heavy shots, right? Munhoz getting bloodied up and all that good stuff, while for a vast majority of the fight, Munhoz was putting up numbers volume-wise. What do you think about that strategy of I'll just tit for tat, little calf kick here, little calf kick here. I'm just racking up points, racking up volume, right? Where do you think like that comes into play when you have a fighter like Chito Vera, who's less volume initially but bigger power? Like, does that tit for tat game work?
Oh, does that tit for tat game work? Yes, Derek. I think if the damage is also similar, if you're giving the pillow punches and you're just racking up numbers, but the face still looks good, there's no welts on the legs, nothing like that, it starts to get a little bit more differentiated. But let's say both people are bloody as can be, but one has more output, then that's where I think the Pedro Munhoz approach really starts to take effect. But if you look at Chito, man, it didn't really look like he was in much of a fight. That's the thing. He was, not bloody, but you look at Munhoz on the other side, and it looked like he was struggling. He was in a dog fight, but only one dog really actually ended up getting more of the damage done. And that's where this was an interesting one too, because again, no finish, but an incredible fight going forward. But you can't blame Chito or anyone for not getting the finish in this fight, because Pedro Munhoz is an absolute dog, and that's why he was able to stand in there with getting bullied up, getting beat up like that. But do you see a lot of value going forward in that same aspect of both guys, the Pedro Munhoz taking the numbers versus the Chito Vera actually getting the damage? Still a little slower output, more output than we've seen in the past. But how far do you think Chito can go with that kind of style?
Well, I'm not sure, man, because that was one of my things. I didn't see it 30-27 for Chito. I saw it 29-28. I thought he edged out the last 2 rounds, and I thought the second round was actually pretty close. So when I saw 30-27, I was like, oh, shit, did Munhoz get it? You know what I mean? But when it comes down to the stylistic approaches, Marlon Vera, we've seen, I'm the biggest Chito fan. The only problem is when you've become to kind of live and die by the finish, it makes getting these decision victories a little more tough, which is why this test was actually very impressive that he passed it, because Pedro Munhoz can be that tactician that just confuses you just enough to just outpoint you, the way that he just did to our man, El Guapo, Chris Gutierrez, right? Or even look at the Sean O'Malley fight. If you think about it, look at what Aljo was able to do against Sean O'Malley versus what Pedro Munhoz was able to do against Sean O'Malley in terms of that little tit-for-tat calf kick game. It was a very similar approach. So I'm not sure because what won it for Aljo in the Sterling fight, or what won it for Aljo in the O'Malley fight, was that clinch at the very end. It wasn't the tit-for-tat. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's really all that I got on there. I don't know. I don't got too much else on that question because it's an interesting question. I think it's just how the evolution of judging, right? Because it always sways. Every couple months, we have a different point to hit on, right?
That's a great point, especially because even on this card, man, there was some wild judging cards. I don't know if we've ever seen, 42 to 24, 3-10-8 round score, and I forget who it was for. I'm pretty sure it was the Ian Machado Gary fight, man. But throughout all of them, not even just that fight, but throughout all of them, there was some interesting judgment calls made by the judges. And I do think you're right, Derek. However it plays out on that night or on that week or on that month, however the judging goes, that's what's going to be really the X factor for a lot of these fights. So if you're a decision fighter going for the tit for tat, the back and forth, pitter patter, it's going to be a rough haul, man. You got to be able to get those finishes in times of need because you can never leave it to those judges, man.
Yep, absolutely. And then really this is just the last point before we move on out of here. We had talked about it earlier. Chito Vera probably going to be one of those next up in line. I mean, when the champion literally says, Chito, what's up? You might definitely get that opportunity. The way that Marlon Vera just fought Pedro Munhoz, can he win against Sean O'Malley with that style?
Ooh, I don't think so, Derek. But the thing is, with the leg kicks that Marlon Vera is going to present again, but then that's what was really the downfall of once you get those leg kicks going, Sean O'Malley doesn't have the movement, and then you're able to put him in some more traps, able to close the octagon a little bit more off. That right there is what I think is the X factor for Chito going into this. But can he have the same performance he did against Pedro Munhoz and succeed against Sean O'Malley? I don't think so. I think Sean's a little too explosive and a little too rangy to be able to just not get into those dangerous situations. Do you see it the same, or do you see something different?
From a striking perspective, I think the fight might look a lot like Corey Sandhagen versus Chito Vera without the wrestling. Like Chito just eating a bunch of shots, trying to gauge distance. He'll be able to eat them because he has the chin, but just walking into a bunch of shots and not returning the same volume. classic kind of decision victory by O'Malley is kind of the way that I see it right now, unless Chito can get back to the old school days of the offensive wrestling and the jiu-jitsu and stuff like that, because that's the part where, once again, that's the big question mark. Either way, big win by Marlon Vera on short notice too. You got to love it.